Hello and welcome back. I'm Victor, and today we'll continue the series on ego development theory. The catchphrase of this stage is "it's all relative," even though Ross said it first on Friends.
It's all relative.
With this stage, the most interesting part of the model begins. We are going to look at life from the perspective of the first of the post-conventional stages, which, as you've probably seen from the title, is named the pluralist or the individualist. First, we'll tackle a general description of the stage, and then we'll go into why there are two names for it. Are you ready? Let's go. Between the last stage, the achiever, and this one, there happens an overall shift from an increasing differentiation and the creation of an independent self-identity towards increasing integration and the deconstruction of the separation that was developed in the previous stages. In those stages, in the conventional ones, the ego moves from a union with the mother, the symbiosis, towards a self-sustaining adult, the achiever, capable of making decisions based on reason and that pursues meaningful goals and purposes. But now, in the second half, in the post-conventional stages, the ego moves towards a more holistic, integrated self that is fully aware of its interdependence with other systems. So people at this first stage of post-conventional ego development start realizing that things are not what they seemed at earlier stages, because the interpretation of reality always depends on the position of the observer. They become fascinated to explore the ideas of themselves having multiple perspectives and seeing those perspectives. As observers, we tend to influence what we observe. Thus, for them, objective judgment becomes impossible, as it is inevitable to filter our observations through our own personal subjective lenses. They understand that one is always a participant observer and can never be detached or objective about anything, actually. In this way, the individual understands and allows the validity of other people's personal views and perspectives. All perspective become valid and worthy of consideration, and it is no longer possible to disregard the humongous diversity of people out there, their beliefs, their values, their preferences. And in this way, here starts an awareness of the complexity of systems and cultural conditioning that we go throughout our lives. They also discover non-objectivity as a participant observer and the potential to deceive oneself. Note, non-objectivity is also called relativity, but not in the same way Einstein said it. Vivid individualism is present, with a focus on relishing experience in the present, listening to every voice and honoring all ideas equally. They believe truth can never be found because, like I said before, everything is relative. There is no place to evaluate anything with 100% certainty. They have a fear of being sucked back into the conventional mindset, and a fear of being constrained by the demands it has. So what they do is they start to dive into a new perspective, the fourth person perspective, which is considered a major watershed to cross in this model, in the ego development theory model. And this fourth perspective allows the individual to stand outside the system and observe themselves and their cultural surroundings from a distance, from far away. So one can look at the status quo through a new lens and query many of its assumptions, its values, its beliefs, So the people at this stage start focusing on epistemology, on examining how they came to believe and feel what they do, and how you actually prove things. This is the first time that the vertical move that happens and the questioning of previous unexamined ideas is actually no longer supported by the majority of society and its conventional representatives. This sort of thinking about questioning assumptions, it may be taught, for example, in college or university courses or throughout higher education. But when the individual actually returns to work, to his house, to his home, these behaviors are no longer appropriate. They become challenged or even dismissed by the people around. Individuals at this stage also realize that groups of people and societies as a bigger group see it as a mandate to mold the minds and hearts of their members. So they can now perceive how much their values and how much their worldviews have been actually influenced by the environments in which they were born, by environments in which they were raised as children and teenagers, and the environments in which they operate now as adults. They see that who we think we are is based on a lot of parameters: historical, geographic, economic, educational, and other factors, such as the overall structure of society. People have much less control over being shaped than they understood before. This is mostly because of socialization, which is a relentless force that begins from the day we enter the world, actually. And it begins with swallowing what are considerable desirable thoughts, desirable feelings, desirable values, desirable behavior, and of course, what is not considered desirable. All of that is fed into our apparatus, into our thinking. Schooling, media, commerce, everything, even the nature of one's native language, the communication patterns that they use, they reinforce this molding of one's mind. The discursive habit, this chaotic thing of looking for another thing, is essential for learning, and it's essential for vertical development, but it is also a danger because of its deep and unconscious place in most people's consciousness. In earlier historical periods, people were stuck, right, in their local communities for most part of their lives. They didn't travel, and the only people who made the dangerous effort of traveling, it was dangerous at that time, even now it is a little bit dangerous. Only those people could find out the habits of other cultures that were present around the world and see similarities, differences that make us all human, basically. So now, in today's day and age, it is obviously much easier to see what other cultures are seeing. That is, if you want to, of course, if you're willing to explore that. Especially when you live in an area where, for example, there are immigrants from different cultures, like Western Europe or North America. You can become exposed to more cultural backgrounds without much effort on your part. And another factor that these individuals realize that acts as a tool of this kind of indoctrination is actually language itself. And language shapes what adults should strive for, what attributes favor success, what is the good life, basically. So people at this stage, they start to turn away from this mindset that the achiever had of doing, being goal-oriented, and they turn to a more inner experience and a discovery of how subjective one's perspective actually is, and how much what seemed objective before is actually in the eye of the beholder. This vertical move is liberating because it releases the ability to explore and to recognize a unique way of being, new choices and new understanding of aspects of the world around. But it is also confusing because now there are unlimited ways of looking at the world, unlimited perceptions, points of perception, and there is actually no one that is better than other. The same event or the same object can have different meanings for different observers, different people, or actually for the same observer in a different context or a different time, different point of time. They love watching themselves make sense of themselves, which is a very, very important change in the mode of thinking that they have in this thought mode. Purely rational analysis, which was the pillar of the achiever stage, is left behind, abandoned. And now a more holistic approach is favored. Rather than analyze isolated parts of experience as independent variables, now they look for connections between them, between things, between variables and subtler clues that might lead to what's going on. And they realize that the whole is actually much more than just the sum of its parts. Feelings, body sensation, context are all taken into account while also approaching things in a more approaching thinking and other things in a more psychological manner. There is less need to explain everything by rational means, and the new attraction is experience itself. So the process or the journey of discovery is now actually more intriguing than reaching the goal or creating the end product. And useful information now may be found in sources that were considered outside scientific inquiry, perhaps viewed with skepticism. For example, body sensations, intuition, dreams, reflection, like self-reflection, reflecting on things, meditation. Mature people at this stage, mature individualist pluralists, can integrate and bridge rational thought with nonlinear approaches to getting information. The hyper-rational tenets of the previous stage of the achiever and the conventional wisdom that was there is now being distrusted. They may reject the whole thing, actually. Also, a qualitative shift happens from a linear, rational, intellectual to a more organismic and embodied awareness. So they treat everything rather than just doing it linearly, rationally. They see the systems and they treat it as an organism, as something that has a life, that has a will of its own, let's say. Right? They actually start reevaluating even the prefixed roles in society, and they begin to also redefine themselves based on their own experience, on their own values, on their own conclusions, which was also seen a bit in the achiever, but now, given this fourth person perspective, it becomes much more focused and much more powerful. And that starts happening when they realize that prior meaning making was conditioned, and that leads into a breaking down of the judgmental frame of mind that they previously had, and even of the scientific certainty that existed in the achiever stage. But the more experience they have at this stage, they actually realize that they need some of those earlier values, attitudes, behaviors. For example, making a living through a job, which you may not necessarily like, or getting along with colleagues at work, with friends, with other people, without constant questioning of the motives and of digging deeper into why they're doing things, or questioning beliefs, or things like that. And the workplace, as managers, they can seem autocratic or idiosyncratic. Some people may find them too aloof, impossible to nail down, or wishy-washy. One kind of never knows where one stands with them. Becoming aware of how easy it is to actually fool ourselves as human appears obvious now to them. Even about our own motivations and intentions. A sense of the futility of framing things as right and wrong, provable or disprovable, also starts showing its head. Where before, in the conventional stages, especially the expert and the achiever, taking action was the main way of solving problems. Now one must figure out what is the problem actually, so how to define it. Defining the problem becomes a more important part of the process of solving it. Also, individuals may enjoy paradoxes and contradictions without the need to explain them away. They get the feeling that it's not necessary to prove everything in order to embrace it. Playful exploration, imagination are all set free, along with creativity, and life becomes fresh and enticing. So, we got the basics down for this stage, but remember, you had two names, the individualist or the pluralist. Why two names? Well, we'll answer that right now. The fourth person perspective can actually be approached through two lenses. So let's take a look at the individualist first. The individualist trusts in one's personal experiences, sensations, thoughts, feelings, in the here and now. So from a preference for doing, as it were in the conventional stages, they do a major shift towards being and feeling. They realize how feelings, thoughts, and all those sensations that are in our body affect each other. And a new sense of the body-mind connection arises, and a beginning to understand the interwoven and systemic nature of experience. Where before it was all cause and effect, you do that, something happens, you do that, about goals. Now the fascination actually is with the present. Attention turns from outcomes to an interest in the process, in the relationship and the complex non-linear influences among variables. So they watch themselves and others on how they change and behave differently in different contexts. Others find inspiring this expression of hope and enthusiasms for their lives that these people have. They relish in their unique experience. So others do find that inspiring. However, they may become so idealistic and so enamored with their discoveries that they ignore potential downsides. And others also might see them as unrealistic, too intense, or too much. they become concerned with making a unique and personal contribution to the world that is independent from any socially approved roles or tasks. And discovering what their purpose may be, it turns into a very real interest. They withdraw, which is why they're called the individualists. They withdraw from external affairs such as company life, daily routines, and they turn inwards, searching for their unique gifts or answers to any questions that they might have. They still bring a contribution to companies if they're left on their own to their own devices, right? If they are given creative freedom and if they're given the freedom that they need, they find novel ways of looking at problems, and they inspire others with their positive, enthusiastic, and nature to pursue their own interests, right? The same way that they are doing themselves. While working independently, they do like to fashion their own schedules and the context of their work to actually optimize their flourishing in this sort of situation. Sometimes they might be content with just simply living day by day, which might be similar to what people know as hippie culture. Right? As they respect others by offering advice and honoring their need for exploring their own interior, they want the same thing from others. Now, because of this new lens that looks towards the inner universe that they inhabit, seeing every influence, they see themselves as less apt to judge others. When this fourth person perspective is driven to the extreme, the individualist may become frustrated and confused. Cynicism, nihilism may become ways to defend themselves against the feeling of being adrift in an unknown sea without any direction, without any course. Some people at this stage may describe themselves as having multiple sub-personalities, multiple voices that they cannot be synthesized into a coherent self-identity. The fourth person perspective may actually be experienced as a cacophony rather than a symphony or a harmony. Prevalent anxiety at this stage is around integrating different parts of oneself. Depression exists, of course, at every stage. Like I said in the intro video, which you can watch right there, there is no one stage better than the other. So evolution is possible, but every stage has their own challenges, and every stage has a different sort of perspective on depression, for example. And in this stage, depression presents itself in four ways. There's a fear of being absorbed back in the rat race by the demands of society, right? A dread of routine work that doesn't allow for self-expression or any creativity. The concern that one may never find a self-definition from which to consistently operate, like I said before, with the multiple perspectives. So they want to operate with a coherent self-sense, but they fear that they might not be able to. And there is a deep experience of worry and tension when it comes to how intimate relationships evolve. So if there is a partner or a long-term friend that is conventional, they may become quite confused about the new way that this person is behaving. The person at this stage may feel unappreciated for what they now feel and have to offer, basically. and they may wish for the significant person in their lives to become more like themselves. That person, so the other person that is left behind in the conventional ways, may feel disrespected and misunderstood, because people in the early post-conventional levels, they cannot fully appreciate the gifts that the earlier levels bring. They still think if everyone would be more like myself, the world would be a better place. Everyone would be happier. It's not necessarily the case. So that was the individualist. Now we can take a look at the pluralist way of experiencing the fourth person perspective. As opposed to the individualist, they focused on the multiplicity of voices in contexts. So they don't impose their views or their interpretation on others, but they seek to respect and understand all their positions. So rather than ignoring differences in order to reach a goal, as the achiever used to do, right, in the achiever stage, now the attention falls exactly on the differences, but from a non-judgmental point of view, actually celebrating the variety of opinions and the variety of perspectives that exist out there. But this tendency to treat every opinion with the same regard can be driven to the extreme, and the over-focus on fairness and voice, giving voice to this person and to this other person, can actually lead to decision paralysis. No one takes the lead, no one asserts a position, no one makes decisions for fear of being seen as too uncooperative or unilateral or oppressive, right, by the other people. So many of the pluralists that take a radical view of this perspective judge all hierarchies as being oppressive, which turns into a negative view of all the conventional stages below. You can imagine that's really not good. Members of the expert and achiever stages, right, that are members of society, they find it really hard to tolerate pluralists and their fervor for egalitarian way of living, let's say. While indeed this over-focus on equality may impair the decision-making process and slow it very, very much, there were individuals that were, or at least felt, marginalized, that may feel acknowledged and heard for the first time. So this egalitarian emphasis of the pluralist worldview is an important step towards further differentiation, further integration. They prepare the way for an even deeper appreciation and tolerance. And that allows for a qualitative distinction and a cherishing of human diversity. For these individuals, the heightened capacity to contact the self and to introspect leads to a greater capacity for empathy, greater capacity for tolerance. They are admired by others, especially by other people that are in the post-conventional stages, for their self-expression, which seems unconcerned and energetic, their spontaneity, and their ability to live a life according to their own unique style, free from the restrictive conventions of the conventional stages, right? They also may be feared, as people see them as unpredictable, or sometimes they're dismissed as non-doers, dreamers, idealists. An awareness of inner conflict pops up, and they see this inner conflict, this ambivalent nature, right, of themselves as a natural aspect of reality. They start noticing it in others as well. They are less judgmental because they understand that we always have a potential for self-deception, and we are culturally biased, basically, in everything. Avowed pluralists can be powerful advocates for tolerance, equality, but they can also get hung up on endless discussions over privileging diversity to the neglect of our common humanity. They have a distinct need and emphasis on unique self-expression and a vivid sense of released energy and individuality. Diversity and equality are values that are common today in Western countries like Europe, right, or Canada, Australia, the US. In most of them, it's actually included in the legislation. Before that, mention of these values by individuals would indeed indicate post-conventional development, but that isn't the case anymore. Today, our world indeed contains much more pluralists than before, or individualists, right, which can be seen, for example, in the strides that the social rights movement around the world has made. Integration of other previous stages is crucial for maturing at this stage. Acceptance and awareness of the previous stages and the contribution that they have on all society is what leads to harmony and peace, not rejection and fighting against the values they bring. Integration is what moves us forward and what helps us gain understanding of one another. Most people that come in contact organically with this model have their center of gravity, at least an achiever, and they start pushing into this stage, if not further. So congratulations is in order. Not a lot of people reach this stage of perspective in their lives. If you want to know more about the basics of the model and how it works, you can find a video on my channel. Like I said, I'll link it. Just to make it easier. It is also interesting to take a look behind in the previous stages and see yourself through those perspectives. I found that to be quite a journey with a lot of insight to be gained. If you're interested, you can watch the whole playlist. I actually recommend it. I do have a short announcement to make. If you need someone to talk to, if you're looking for an ear to listen, feel free to reach out. It doesn't matter if we know each other or not. I'm always looking to connect to new people or to reconnect with someone from back in the day. You can reach me on Facebook, I'll link it in the description below, my Facebook account, my Instagram, or even here on YouTube through a comment down below. I know that time is a valuable resource, but I also understand how much talking or even writing to someone can help in a difficult time. That being said, don't forget to give some love to that thumbs up button. Subscribe to the channel. I know it sounds cliche, and a lot of people say it on YouTube, but it is true. Subscribing helps the channel more than I can actually explain. Thank you for spending some time here. I wish you all the best.